Welcome to another episode of the Laura the Library Lady podcast, a production of the Massillon Public Library.
Hi, it's Laura the Library Lady coming to you on our podcast from the Massillon Public Library here high atop the library in our studio. And today I have with me Bailey Yoder, who's the curator of the Paul Brown Museum at the Massillon Museum.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So we were talking about Paul Brown and how the Paul Brown Museum got to be inside the Massillon Museum.
Yeah, so it's been quite the journey. It was actually started by the Massillon Tiger Football Booster Club back in the 70s, founded as the Massillon Tiger Football Museum. You had Junie Studer, Wilbur Arnold, Gene Berner, and Jim Bryan, who got together and had this idea of preserving the history of the Massillon Tigers. They didn't want to lose the history because of such a storied program. So they started collecting archives, photographs, objects, and it just snowballed into this wonderful, amazing collection that documents the history going back to 1891. And so over about 30, 40 years, they had to move to several different locations. And in 2008, they were really trying to build a new Paul E. Brown Museum facility that would be located over at the high school. And unfortunately, because of not enough funding and a lot of the plans fell through, that didn't come to fruition. However, several years later, after many conversations with the Massillon Museum, the Booster Club and the museum came together to an agreement and a partnership for the Massillon Museum to become the preservers of this amazing collection. And so in 2017, ground broke at the Massillon Museum for our expansion project.
Right.
I came in 2018 and watched the giant hole in the ground become this amazing building, of which has the Paul Brown Museum galleries, a research archive library, and a state-of-the-art collection storage. So it's been, we opened the first exhibition in October of 2018 during the Massillon-McKinley Rivalry Parade.
Perfect.
And so it's just been going strong ever since. We've had between 15 and 20 different exhibitions that feature everything about Massillon football, Paul Brown, semi-professional football here in Massillon, women in sports, and back in 2021, we did an exhibition called Fluent Football that was talked about the correlation between the COVID-19 pandemic and the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918.
And I know you have a lot of things on the website, so if folks can't come down to view the exhibitions at the museum, there are a lot of really great archives and things on the web.
Yes, so if you can't come and physically visit the galleries, for the last 2 years we've partnered with an organization called Buy 360. Our education department has been really great in working with this company to scan all of our gallery spaces and put them online, so they're all available to view online. There's 4 different Paul Brown exhibits that you can explore from the past 2 years. And it's just a really amazing thing, and it kind of like floats you through. It's not like a click through, like picture to picture. You are able to, it's like you're walking through.
So it really is virtual, like a virtual reality walkthrough. Cool.
Yeah. So, and then we also have our virtual archives. We have about 20,000 of our photographic collection online, which is available through our Massillon Museum website. So there's anything from related to football, schools, early history of the Massillon Museum when we were located here at the library. So pretty much anything that you would want to kind of peruse and look through, we probably have on our virtual photograph archive.
Awesome. Well, we were talking before a little bit about Paul Brown's life. He was born in 1908. He died in 1991. And, from being a student here at Washington High School and being the quarterback to being a teacher and a coach, I know something I just learned today was that he was a coach at Severn School in Maryland. So that was evidently his first job in 1930.
Yeah, so he graduated from Miami University down in Oxford, Ohio, and he had just married his wife, Katie Brown, who was also here from Massillon, and he actually got a teaching position out at Severn Prep. And he was supposed to be the assistant football coach and assistant sports coach, because in the late 20s, early 30s, everybody was the coach of everything. And right before the football season started, the head coach of the football team got severely ill and had to walk away. And Paul Brown was then appointed as the head coach in his first year. I believe he was 21 years old. And so it was just a very kind of like, oh, I'm coaching now. And he did end up leading the school's football team to their first state championship that year in 1930.
That's amazing. So then he was here at Washington High School from 32 to 40, then Ohio State, and then I believe he was at the Great Lakes Naval Academy and coached there, and was also an officer in the Navy, right?
Yes, he was second lieutenant in the Navy. So in his third year at after his third year at Ohio State, he found out that he was eligible for the draft. So he actually enlisted rather than being drafted. So he was able to be stationed at Great Lakes Naval Academy, appointed as head football coach, and I believe assistant athletic director. But from there, he was able to pick the servicemen to be on his football team. So all of the servicemen there were all active duty and could be sent out at a moment's notice. However, Paul Brown got around that by kind of saying like, oh, hey, they're on my football team. I need them here. You want us to beat Notre Dame this year? Then I need all of these players. However, if the players didn't abide by, or the servicemen didn't abide by Paul Brown's rules of being in bed by a certain hour, no alcohol, don't smoke, no fraternizing with women, they would then their names would be sent to the enlistment officers, and they could be deployed in an instant.
Well, I have a quote here from Ken Cones, who was a Browns safety. There's a right way, a wrong way, and the Paul Brown way.
Yes.
And it sounds like he started out with that.
Yes. Yeah.
Pretty much from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. He started at that here in Massillon, at least. I'm not 100% sure about Severn Prep. There's not a lot of archives about his 2 years at his first location. But he definitely started a lot of what he brought into the college and Navy and the professional arena here in Massillon. He thought it worked here, and so he continued on and kept using it, and it continued to be extremely successful.
I guess. So with the Cleveland Browns, starting out in 1946, and he was there until 62, I didn't realize he got fired.
Yeah, that's like a black mark on Cleveland history.
So, I mean, okay, I'm from Massillon. I like the Tigers, Okay, I'm not exactly into football a whole lot, but just to read about Art Modell firing Paul Brown, I'm very shocked. I'm like, okay, I thought he was the most hated man in Cleveland sports because of moving the Browns to Baltimore. I didn't know that he should have been hated before that for firing Paul Brown.
It started well back in probably 1961 when he acquired the football team. I do a whole presentation on the war between Paul Brown and Art Modell.
We should have you come up here to the library and present that.
It's an amazing presentation, and I could honestly probably talk for like over 2 hours if you gave me the time, because it's just, it goes back and forth. There's a lot of pettiness between the two men. But when Art Modell acquired the team in 1961, he actually had 4 different partners, because it was several $1 million that he would have acquired the team for. Well, he got all of this finance backing from all these other people that he only put in about $400,000 of his own money to purchase the team. He was a New York businessman. So he was very young. He was late 30s, early 40s. And so he was like all business, and he wanted to be a hands-on owner, which Paul Brown was very much not used to because he was dual acting as the general manager and head coach of the Cleveland Browns for over 15 years at that point. So he was making all of the contract decisions, player decisions, coaching decisions, appointments, things like that. So everything that had to do with the team on the field and the coordination of the team, Paul Brown was doing. When Modell came in, he wanted to handle the player contracts and work with the players and their why do I want to say producer? It's not producer. Agents. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes words don't work for me.
I knew what you meant.
But Modell wanted to work with the players and their agents and write out the contracts. And Brown was just very type A, wanted a handle on everything, which I can completely understand. I also love knowing everything that's going on and wanting to have a hand in everything. So there were several contracts and several things that happened. Paul Brown traded running back Bobby Mitchell to the then Washington Redskins. And in return, they were going to get Ernie Davis in the following year's draft. Well, when they acquired Ernie Davis, Art Modell offered him a guaranteed contract. So similar to the Deshaun Watson guaranteed 5-year contract. So Ernie Davis's contract was also guaranteed that he was going to be on the team. And it was also an outrageous sum signing for a player of that time, 1962. He was signed for $80,000, which doesn't seem like a lot of money for a professional player, but at the time that was almost double what players were being offered. And Brown initially had this idea that Ernie Davis and Jim Brown were going to be like the best running back duo that NFL had seen at the time. But Brown also didn't like to sign contracts until after summer camp was over because he had a very limited roster number. And so he liked to make sure that he was signing the right players, the best players to those roster spots. So after summer camp, that's when he would sign contracts with players. With this contract being signed in the spring with Ernie Davis, he was guaranteed a spot on the roster. Brown couldn't do anything to stop it. And so that kind of drove another wedge in between. And of course, Art Modell is hyping up in the papers. This is going to be a championship season for the Cleveland Browns. We've got Ernie Davis. We've got Jim Brown. We've got all these high and mighty, amazing players. And then Ernie Davis is diagnosed with leukemia prior to the 1962 season. He unfortunately never plays in an NFL game, and he passes away young in the spring of 1963.
How awful.
And then, of course, you have another string of injuries that plagued the Cleveland Browns during the season, and they end with a not-so-winning record. I believe it was 6-3 or 6-5 or 7-3. No, hold on. 7-6. Again, words and numbers apparently plague me today. So Modell felt that Brown let him down, and it was Brown's fault. And the years had passed him by. The game had passed him by. He was this old militarized style coach with his techniques that weren't staying up to date with the current trends in professional football. And so January of 1963, Art Modell hands Paul Brown his pink papers and says, "You are no longer the general manager and head coach of my professional football team. However, I'm keeping you on as the president of the organization. So you are contractually obliged to stay with the Cleveland Browns for the next 5 years, but you can't do anything." So my grandmother is adamant. She tells me all the time that her hatred for Art Modell started with the firing of Paul Brown in 1963. Then it was just the knife in the back in 1996 when Art Modell announced that he was moving them to Baltimore.
Man. Well, while we're on that subject, what is a Brown?
So that's the question that I asked my dad all the time growing up. When I first started at the museum, it's sad to say, but I hardly knew anything about the Massillon Tigers. The only thing I knew about Paul Brown was that he founded the Cleveland Browns, and they were named for him. And asking my dad, "What is a Brown?" Like every other professional football team has like
an animal,
an animal, the Bengals, the Jaguars, the Patriots. Like there's something that I can like focus and visualize and see. Yeah. And so in my research here at the museum and how I come to understand it, the Cleveland Browns, when the franchise was first started, so they were formed as an expansion franchise of a brand new football league called the All-American Football Conference in 1945. There were 6 total teams, one of which was in Cleveland. So when Paul Brown was hired on as the GM and head coach, he was tasked with, what are the colors? What are the jerseys going to look like? You find the players, you find your coaching staff, and you find the mascot. And
So from the ground up.
yes. So very hands-on and finding and creating all of this for this new team. So they send out to the Cleveland Plain Dealer a survey to the citizens of Cleveland and the surrounding areas. What should the mascot of your new football team be? And actually, people were sending back, oh, it should be the Panthers. There was a former professional football team in Cleveland called the Panthers, and so they were trying to pay homage to that. Well, out of the woodwork comes this guy who says, well, I owned the Panthers, and so you need to pay me royalties for using this mascot name. Paul Brown said, no, thank you, and started again and went back to the drawing board. So they sent out these surveys again to the newspapers, and people started writing back, and they said, well, it's Paul Brown's team, so it should be named the Browns. And so that's where the name comes from.
I love it.
Another fun little quip, everybody likes to discuss Brownie the Elf. Little known fact to a majority of people, and if you know this, awesome, I'm so glad.
Pat ourselves on the back then.
Yes. A lot of people in Paul Brown's close circle of friends called him Brownie.
Ah.
So there is the mascot, Brownie the Elf. It's a caricature that came out in 1946. You see it on all of the game programs that come out and all of the literature and promotions.
I think he's on the field.
Yes. So he's the last 2 years he's been the 50-yard line. It was a survey sent out to all the Cleveland Browns fans, select your 50-yard line center design, and it's been Brownie the last 2 years, and a lot of people, it's been a topic of contention for a lot of people. But I like the story of, it's based on a caricature, not necessarily of Paul Brown, but the nickname Brownie. Paul Brown. So it is, in fact, Paul Brown. To add to this theory is, after Brown was fired by Modell in 1963, Modell tried to erase all evidence of the Brownie the Elf mascot. And so Brownie the Elf actually disappears for about 40 years and returns with the new expansion franchise team in 1999.
See, you have all this information. I am so excited to have you here telling us all of this stuff that I did not know, that I didn't know that I wanted to know.
Yes.
You know?
I'm full of fun facts. And
I was just going to say, it's fun.
You put it perfectly. I have all of these facts that I think are fun, that I like to share with other people, that you didn't think that you needed to know, but now you do. And now you're glad that you know.
That's right. And we're sharing them with our audience.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Bailey, for being here. Bailey Yoder from the Massillon Museum and the Paul Brown Museum. Come on downtown and take a visit and take in some football facts and some fun stuff.
Thank you so much, Laura. This was a lot of fun today.
Thanks for listening to the Laura the Library Lady podcast. Be sure to check out the rest of the episodes on the Massillon Public Library's YouTube channel. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms.